Отечественная война 12-го года это
I would call the Patriotic War of 1812 the hour of triumph of the Russian Empire and the Russian people. It is truly patriotic not because it happened a long time ago, but because the entire nation, from an ordinary peasant to the emperor himself, rose to resist the enemy, which threatened not only the national identity and freedom, but even worse, the Russian faith.
Свободу, но и самое страшное на веру. Своим поведением, своим
Napoleon's soldiers behaved outrageously, as if having no faith at all, which made Russians hate them. The French proclaimed atheism to be their new state religion and considered Napoleon as a demigod, bringing back the worshipping cult of Roman emperors. Religion of this kind, teaching that an emperor is equal to God, is very aggressive and tolerates no genuine faith. Clergymen were persecuted, religious services were banned, and the French troops allowed no bell chimes during their stay in Moscow. The entire nation stood up against more than just invaders, but faith mockers. People could not forgive this. That is why the war became so large-scale. The war was a rise of the whole Russia, all classes of people, but primarily the three of them: the nobility, the clergy, and the peasants. Let's take, for example, the liberation of the Veria town. When the peasant guerrilla units, led by a priest, Ivan Skobiev, from the village of Vyshgorod, helped the army to free the town. This was what we call a patriotic war. Crowds of peasants, led by priests with a cross, joined the Russian troops to storm the French defenses and free the town in some 30 minutes. The 1812 war wasn't called patriotic back then. This notion, first officially introduced in 1839 in a comprehensive and document-based description of the Patriotic War of 1812 by Alexander Mikhailovsky-Danilevsky. And since then, all historians and ordinary people have continued the practice and refer to this war as patriotic. The War of 1812, that was an absolute defeat over Napoleon, made the Russian people feel so high and proud, especially the intellectual and well-educated nobility. They were all excited about the fall of Napoleon's France. According to witnesses, Alexander I never visited the Borodino battlefield after the war. On the battle day, August the 26th, when he came to Moscow, he went to a ball, while people went to church to commemorate the fallen. Alexander I didn't like to remember the 1812 events. Of course, casualties were astoundingly high, and Moscow was burnt down. It is still argued whether the city was set on fire by the Russians or the French. I think we will never know the truth. What I want to ask now, do any of our contemporaries know how a Russian stove works? I myself learned this when I was 30. If you can't handle the stove, a fire is more than possible. If one makes a fire in the streets of a wooden city with wooden curbs amid a dry autumn, this is a perfect set for a blaze. I think the fire happened, as Tolstoy wrote, because it simply could not but have happened. But it's amazing how quickly the city was rebuilt. Our citizens, meaning Moscow city dwellers, managed to restore the city and even make it more beautiful than before the invasion. It was an example of outstanding bravery and creativity of Russians. The first on battlefields, and the second during reconstructions of destroyed and burnt down towns, cities and rarities. Practically everything was restored. I think only some golden church vessels were not restored, as gold was pricey at that time. I think maybe it was not a priority then. Already in 1835, way before the 25th anniversary celebrations of the 1812 victory, Russia started preparations for the festivities. According to numerous sources of that time, Emperor Nicholas I ordered to erect a number of war monuments. It was him who adopted a grand project to erect monuments at battlefields. Monuments, namely memorial chapels, were to be placed at the battle sites from the Russian border in Kaunas to Moscow and Tarutino. A total of 8 memorial chapels were unveiled to commemorate the Patriotic War of 1812. This was a monument to the Russian clergy, weapons, and the army. Only one genuine chapel survived till today, the one in Smolensk. After the 1917 October Revolution, they were destroyed everywhere, regardless of whether it was capitalist Lithuania or Soviet Russia or Belarus. More monuments were opened in 1912, primarily at the Borodino field, which was turned into a huge memorial. It was part of a political course pursued by Emperor Nicholas II. He banned erecting the same monuments at Borodino. In his special military decree, the emperor emphasized that every Borodino monument should be unique, so that the battlefield would not look like a big cemetery, but like a memorial with monuments constructed by various military units. Each unit was to make its own monument with its specific symbols. Before the construction, an assembly of officers was called up, and an officer was chosen to trace a regiment's history in the 1812 war. He was also to choose an appropriate place for a monument and buy this land from peasants who owned it. Usually, a rural gathering of peasants decided to let go of the land for free. For example, the Guard artillery was defending Semyonovskaya village in the left flank and later got the land in the area without paying for it. And mind you, this land was practically the only way the peasants provided food for themselves. So giving it away for free to build a monument was a sacrifice and a heroic gesture. In 1883, Christ the Saviour Cathedral, the construction of which lasted for 44 years, was consecrated in Moscow. This is the grandest monument to the 1812 war. The construction was funded by public donations, and the cathedral was a symbol of remembrance and the great victory. However, this did not stop the Soviet government from destroying the cathedral in 1931 as one of the religious cult facilities. From the point of the Marxist doctrine, the 1812 war was a bad example. First, Soviet historians were very harsh in their assessments of the war. They even regretted the victory and Napoleon's fall, as it might have prevented him from crushing the Imperial Russia, importing capitalism, and initiating class conflict in the country. The war came in handy in the run-up to the Great Patriotic War of 1941-1945, when time for patriotism came. But what was left of that war? Bagration's grave was exploded. A number of Borodino monuments were destroyed. Even if we remember the 1812 heroes now and want to find their graves, we won't be able to do this, as they all were lost between 1917 and 1935-1937. Only a sharp turn of the Soviet Marxism from proletarian internationalism to patriotism when the country saw a military threat similar to the one of 1812 made the government recall the 1812 war. In 1962, during the Cold War times, the Soviet government ordered large-scale celebrations of the 150th anniversary of Russia's First Patriotic War. A solemn assembly in Moscow's Kremlin Palace of Gatherings has come together to mark the 150th anniversary of the Great Patriotic War of 1812. The world will never forget those who fought and gave their lives for freedom, happiness and prosperity of our motherland. The participants in the celebrations remembered the immortal heroism of the Russian people, the bravery of our predecessors, and the glorious traditions of the Russian military. The memory of the heroes is sacred. We do not know the names of all who fought and fell in this war, but we admire their courage. Endless crowds are coming to Borodino this day, where great sons of our great nation, glorified in the songs and verses, seem to be coming back to life. A new memorial marking the victory anniversary, the museum panorama of the Borodino battle, has been opened in Moscow. Descendants of the then soldiers will never forget the legendary heroes of Borodino. The grave of the great commander Kutuzov, who led the people of Russia, is covered with flags of the defeated enemy armies. Moscow's ancient Kremlin stores Napoleon's weapons. They used to terrify the whole world and now lie here silent, tamed, and crushed by the invincible Russian army. In the new Russia, the Patriotic War of 1812 is finally treated from an ideology-free perspective. There appeared new approaches, absolutely different and based on archive sources and not on formal scientific dogmas. New research interests in the Patriotic War have emerged. In 2000, with the help of public donations, Russia's biggest Orthodox cathedral, Cathedral of Christ the Saviour, was rebuilt. This is the most splendid monument to Russia's First Patriotic War.